Okay, I'll start with Mr. Eazi, who is the CEO of EmPawa Africa. He is a Nigerian singer, songwriter, and entrepreneur. He's the pioneer of Banku music, which is a fusion sound he describes as a mixture of Ghanaian highlife and Nigerian chord progression and patterns. Mr. Eazi released his debut mixtape, About to Blow, in July 2013. He gained an international audience following his release of Skin Tight. That was a single. And his second mixtape, Life is Easy Volume 1, Accra to Lagos, was released in February 2017. In August 2019, Mr. Eazi launched EmPawa Africa, a talent incubation initiative that's designed to nurture and support up-and-coming African artists. So about 30 musicians would be enrolled in the first edition and then would receive a grant that would give them mentorship to scale their music career. This initiative, I should mention, is supported in part by YouTube. We have Azim Rashad, the Senior Vice President for Columbia Records. He is a seasoned entertainment executive and strategist at global brands like Motown, Universal, Atlantic, Capitol, RocNation. We talked about all the great talents and influencers that he's worked with and been involved in their brand strategy intimately. These names are Mary J. Blige, Sam Smith, Diddy, Nicole Buss, who I love, The Roots, the Carters, Jay-Z and Beyonce, Little Nas, John Legend, and many, many more. Azim, thank you for coming back again today. We welcome you to the panel. And then we have Lester Pace, who is the new Senior Vice President of RocNation. He's also a well-seasoned veteran in both the radio space and the music industry space in terms of record labels and what he has done. He has a track record that includes being at Interscope Records, heading urban promotions for 13 years as regional and 4 as national director. He's worked with also a great number of artists as well. And last but not the least, we have Godwin Tom, who is on the Nigeria side. He is a renowned talent manager, a creative entrepreneur, and the Chief Executive Officer for iManageAfrica. It's a talent and events management company that he set up, and he has worked with or managed artists such as M.I, Wizkid, who's done a great job crossing over, YJ, Davido, and many more. So welcome, 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 everyone. We're once again glad to have you here as we delve into the topic around representation and having that team and understanding what a good deal is. And I thought for this session, I want to actually start off with Mr. Eazi. And because you started on the entertainment side, right, being an artist, and you've kind of spread your wings, being independent, right, and now you're actually like managing other artists, just not in Nigeria or Ghana, but across the continent, and transitioned from just being an artist to an entrepreneur. What kind of team did you need to have to do that? So it'd be great to kind of get a sense of like how you started, right, and how you kind of made the decisions that got you to where you are today.
Yeah, thanks, guys. To keep it short, I think before I started, before I started singing, I came from a world where I was in a VC world. Like VC, I mean venture capital. And so, coming from that mindset and seeing how, VCs invest in startups and then not just bring money, but also bring the network and the tools to scale. And, these VCs have an equity in the startups. And, the startup, the goal is for the startup valuation to go maybe 5, 10, 50x. And on sale, everybody laughs home. And if there's successes, everybody's happy. If there's failure, everyone participates. That was my mindset.
So that's very different because you came in with a very strong business acumen as opposed to, I guess, the everyday artist that comes in because they're creative and they love the music.
Exactly. So for me, the music was a hobby. I just wanted to grow my tech company to be one of the biggest in Nigeria at the time. And the music and everything I was learning in the VC world, I'll just apply, especially the marketing and data mining on the music side. And the music started to pop off. And at some point, I had to go to my investors and say, hey, it looks like I'm going to be an artist now, I grew from there. So I came in with a strong sense of entrepreneurship, and from that side, I think that's what has driven my independence. I just started. I remember my manager who just moved on to start his talent agency. He had just finished from flight school, and I knew when we were in uni he was good at negotiation and booking artists. So I looked around and I said, hey, why don't you come be my manager and let's do this together. So I've been driven. I've just had that small team of myself, my then manager, and just leveraged on relationships with a lot of people. So having mentors like Denzel Ferguson of Platoon, who I could always draw to, Sifo Damini from Universal in South Africa, I could always run to for advice. Ferdy Younger from Universal, from Colombia, UK, and just basically watching and learning. So I remember doing my first licensing deal with Around the World for Dance for Me. And whilst everybody took money out of it, what I did was watch and see who did the radio, who did the PR, who did the TV, and then reach out to them and say, hey, I want you to do my TV, I want you to do my PR. So for me, it's been a really small team, and I've just built from there, and I've outsourced where I need to outsource, and I guess I keep building till today, and it's transcended from being just the musician and seeing the amount of the value space that exists in the African music business, and saying, hey, someone needs to provide that value, and I'll be damned if the value, just like every other thing that happens in Africa, I'll be damned if the raw talent again is picked from Africa, is shipped out of Africa, leaving less than 5% of the revenue back in Africa, leaving no infrastructure back in Africa. I'll be damned if that happened and I did nothing to aid, and that's why I started EmPawa Africa.
Could you talk a little bit about EmPawa Africa?
Yeah, so EmPawa Africa really was born. I remember I had wanted to put out my last mixtape in 2019, November, and I reached out to labels and a couple partners, and I was like, hey, I make X a year annually on my digital revenue across board. So I wanted an advance on my earnings. So I said, hey, this is like me. In my mind, this was like going to ask for a loan. So I of course, I know the labels and distributors, blah, blah, blah. They're not banks, right? So they give advance on earnings. But I expected that advance to be, to be very friendly to myself, seeing that, hey, if I have a catalog that's doing 5x and I want to bring on an additional catalog, I should be able to ask you for 7x in advance, and you should be able to collateralize that on my catalog and just do the split straight up. And so, but everyone I talked to was asking me for an arm and a leg, and I was like, wait a minute, what's really happening here? Like, why is this thing not so straightforward? And it was like I was crazy. I would go into label meetings and I'd be like, yo, what's going on? And so I decided to, I'm like, I'm going to put this out by myself. I called up Denzel. I'm like, yo, Denzel, we're going to put out this. I decided not to take any funding, put in my own money, and that just drove everything. I started to, how can I distribute music? How can I have a distribution platform? And I did all that research, and then started to hire the team and white label solutions and build that, hey, how can I do publishing? How can I collect on publishing by myself? And I decided to go partner with a publishing company that had tech and have a tech-driven admin system. Oh, and it's from then I gave out grants. I gave out $300,000 in grants to 100 artists from across 17 African countries. And then from the grants, we then went on to shoot videos. And I found out these artists didn't have YouTube channels. They didn't know how to put their music up online. And so then the distribution platform was valid. And then I opened the YouTube channel because I needed a channel that could give equal opportunity to all artists. And so we ended up setting up EmPawa YouTube channel, which is the first YouTube channel that aggregates music from all over Africa, and that has grown. And so I've been iterating based on the need, and now I'm at the point where all artists we distribute for have a dashboard where they see how much they earn real time across all the different revenue lines. And now I have enough information to provide financial solutions for the artists. So now EmPawa is growing to the point where we don't only incubate artists, but now we could give financial solutions to artists backed and secured on their IP. And it's like we're giving you a loan that is backed on your IP, and we're investing in the assets that is your intellectual property. That's the asset class we're investing in. And we're growing to the point where very soon we'll be launching the Africa Music Fund, which is just what we're doing, a very big raise right now, which is just a fund that just goes out there and invests in African content, artist-friendly African content. That's like 70-30, 70 to the artist, 80% to the artist, backed on their catalog, you know. So
Mr.
that's
Eazi,
how it's going.
So you're really a finance guru moonlighting as an artist because yeah, you're really a finance guru because I think everyone is just like, okay.
So many finance people.
That's incredible. That's incredible, and I think that, you know, before we go on, and that's why I wanted to really just kind of start with your story, because, you know, most artists don't understand the business of what they're doing, you know, and I think that if you first start by understanding the business, then you can kind of look and understand what is good management and what a good deal is if you understand the finances behind the business. Yeah. So with that, I want to go to Lester. And Lester, let's just ask the basic question. Who needs representation? Right? If you're talent, I mean, what is representation? Who needs it? And I want to even delve out, because a lot of times we just talk to artists, but, you know, there are people that write music, they're producers, you know, so can we just even define the scope and really maybe shed light as to, you know, if you're not a Mr. Eazi that kind of knows off the background, but I mean, I think one of the things that you talked about was that you leaned in on a lot of different experiences and expertise and pulled them in. But if I'm brand new and I want to enter into the business as talent, what should I be looking for in terms of representation, Lester?
I was getting ready to say, I think you should, I would like to piggyback off that. I think that question should have went to Azim, because me and Azim sat on a panel a few years ago, and he answered this question. It was the best answer that, I don't know if you remember, Azim, about, we was talking about the artist representation, and I would piggyback off of that. You remember that panel we sat on in Atlanta?
I think so. And I think I've changed my answer a little bit, but I think that at the end of the day, like, you don't have nothing to manage when you get started.
Yeah, you know, that's it.
You know, you don't. When you first start, you should, and shout out to Mr. Eazi, first of all. God bless you, brother. You are an inspiration. I'm not sure if you're familiar with a brother of ours named Eazi, who runs Empire out of San Francisco, but, you know, we should offline. You are doing amazing work there. But as you get started, and I have an artist background as well, and that's how I started in the business, you know, there's nothing to manage. And the first thing I think people should do is to educate themselves, you know. If those of us who are spiritual know that you're supposed to seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave, and I don't take the excuse that people don't know. It's too much technology, it's too much opportunity, there's too much information just floating in the universe for you to not have any context about what you're doing. So I think the first thing artists should do is just try to identify who they want to be, what their vision is, what they see for themselves 5-10 years down the line, and then take it as far as they can, because they have to try and fail and have errors to know, you know, where they're going. When they get to a place where they have something to manage, then you bring people on. And, there's a term in the United States called homeboy management. And that's basically your friend, your cousin, people who are around you who don't have any experience. So you have no experience and they have no experience. So the two of you together is like the blind leading the blind. But I think the first thing you should do, there's books, again, the internet is probably the greatest invention, in mankind, right? And I think that if you just do some basic research, you can at least start to figure out, the beginnings and the foundation and the blueprint of what you want to do.
Okay. So maybe Lester, I'll give you the follow-up question. So when I've done my research and I'm trying to identify a good manager, and I think this came up yesterday where a lot of people hire their cousin or their mom, and there, as Johnny said, there's a place for that. But what kind of experience should you be looking for in a team that you're looking to manage you?
Once you get to, I guess you get to that level, you got to, in today's, because everything has changed in the last, 8 to 9 to 10 years, because back in the day, you wouldn't need a person to work social media to what you need now. And I think that's a viable source, that you got to have a social media person. And then you got, probably back in the day, you wouldn't think a guy going around snapping pictures all the time to post and give you good quality things, those things that we should look at like, oh, just the camera guy. But the camera guy can make you more of a star, because if he's able to put, that whole look and presentation when you put it up online and go from there. So I think, and one of my key points, I tell somebody, if you get a manager, don't depend on a manager who's going to be looking just to make money off of your pocketbook when you first get there. And using that example, I had an artist on Interscope back in the day named Bubba Sparks. And so his management team, the artists are supposed to be at the radio station. Now, Azim can relate to this. We go to radio, and they supposed to go on a show at 7. They get to the market at 6 o'clock. And we're like, man, you late. He's like, man, I'm not late. I'm going to 7 o'clock. I said, bro, but you missed your opportunity to go to radio and market yourself. And I asked him, what are you going to do when Interscope drops you? He's like, what do you mean when Interscope drops me? I said, you're going to get dropped. The only person that don't have got dropped is Jay-Z, okay? He drops labels. I said, but you're going to get dropped. I said, what you and your manager should have did, if you had a smart manager, you would have got here and made all the contacts with the radio station, all the key people. So when you do get dropped or let go, you build a relationship with the radio station. You can come back and use that to your advantage down the road if you want to become independent. So so I use that aspect for having a good manager, one who has your interests better and is not a do-boy. A lot of people go hire managers that are do-boys. They do whatever you tell them to do instead of doing what they need to do and don't know how to tell you no. So you have to have a manager who's strong and has not, it just have to be expertise, but is willing to tell the artist no. I think most of the time the artists tell the manager yes and no, and you have to sit down sometime and explain to the artist the reason I want you to do this. This is the reason why you should do this. What this is going to be. You may not see it now, but you'll see it down the road, maybe a year or two from now. Another example would be, like I told the artist before, if you had to do a promotional show for a radio station, you had a show in that same city where they want to offer you $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000. Your manager who's concerned about the money would take the money. Me, on the other hand, I would take the radio show knowing that we could come back and get that money later, and then we don't build that relationship with that radio station. So a lot of times you have to, everything shouldn't be looked as a money thing, but what is it going to do for you? And I think having a good manager is having your best interest at that time for what's better. And most of the time, a young artist can't make that decision. So that's why they got to have somebody that has some knowledge and not have to be older, but somebody, like I said, that can really think. And like, I can't say my brother's name, but he brought up a lot of great things, even from how he started. And somebody with a lot of, information, I think would be great.
I think in addition to that, and I think that, you wouldn't hire a nurse to run a restaurant. You wouldn't hire a fireman to come mow your lawn. I think that people should have a basic level of business acumen. If you can't manage a checkbook, you have poor communication skills. When I see you out in public, you don't know how to interact with people, because management is about protecting the artist as well. And I think that you want someone, to Lester's point, who's going to have your best interest, but more important, is going to protect your interests. And early on, and I know, it's a lonely journey as an artist a lot of times, when you're getting started, having your best friend or family member alongside you to kind of help coach and guide you as well as be a companion is something that's probably comforting. But I think you
Right.
should also look at that person, how they run their life. I often tell like my staff members, if you can't manage your T&E, how am I going to trust you with an entire budget to run a project? And I think the same should apply when an artist is looking at their team. If you have people around you who you look at their life and it's all in disarray, I don't think you really want them in your business that way.
Right. Right. I would have loved Godwin. Godwin, are you there? Are
Yeah,
we
I'm
having
back.
technical? Okay, we can't see your video. Okay, great. Godwin, you are the CEO of iManageAfrica. You've managed and worked with some of Africa's top stars. What is your take in terms of what is needed, especially on the continent? The skills needed to be a good manager, right? And to really take the careers of artists to the next level.
Um, well, first of all, thanks for having me here.
Thank you.
One of the things I find is the biggest issue here is education. We have we have over 170 universities in Nigeria, and not one offers music business as a course, even though there are millions of people who are trying to get into the industry. So that's the first issue that I believe needs to be fixed. Um, More people need to understand what they're getting into. So you see an artist who maybe has a good song, but because he doesn't have a pool of people to talk to about how to take his career further, has to talk to his friend or his brother who has no idea how anything works. So most times on this side, it's not necessarily because the artist is trying to be stupid. It's because they don't have who to talk to. They don't have people to contact to say, you know what, you're a manager. I've seen the work. I see that you've been trained for this, and so this is you can handle my business. And then the guys who actually have an idea of what to do, most of us haven't been doing a great job with bringing people on, educating more people about how the system works. The other thing I believe is an issue is a lot of guys come here from the UK and the US and try to copy paste processes, right? So you have how things were done in the US or in the UK, and you think, you know what, if I come to Africa or come to Nigeria, then I have an edge. Then you realize you have no information at all about how anything works on this side. So it's a very peculiar market, and people don't understand that. So that's the other issue. I believe I heard Mr. Pace talk about people having the right guys. Unfortunately, in Africa, we don't have people who are trained enough to be the right guys. So
Mhm.
those are some of the issues to also look at. I mean, I run a training. I've been running a training program for 4 years now, and a lot of people want to learn. A lot of people want to be part of the solution. Um, but then when they realize, and that's mainly because of what they see on TV. So the demand for it is based on, if I manage the artist, pretty much the entourage lifestyle that they watch on TV. I go party with the artist, party with the girls, but then they come in and I take them through strategy development, research, proposal writing, negotiation, and they're like, hold up. Right. So I think
This is not what I bargained for,
yeah,
please.
so I think that education would also open people's eyes. There are people who start the program saying, I want to be a manager. And halfway through, I have a guy who's decided, you know what, I want to go back to law school because I believe I can add more value as an entertainment or IP lawyer. So I think more education would help us find the right people to manage things on this side.
Cool. Mr. Eazi, at what point did you feel that you needed management? Because you obviously are very hands-on, or are you still very hands-on without a manager?
Yo, I'm the worst. I'm very hands-on. Like I'm the worst. To be honest, I guess the point I realized I needed a manager was when I realized I couldn't reply all the emails. And I realized it was crazy me saying, "Hello, this is Mr. Izzy's manager." And then I'd forget that I'd forget that So I used to say my name was Alex, and so I'll say this is Alex, Mr. Eazi's manager, and then I'll forget and I'll get into a meeting and someone will say, yeah, I was speaking to Alex, and I'm like, Alex? So I think for me, I'm not gonna lie, for me, it was at that point I realized that, you know what, I need a manager. So the first thing was I called my friend who was in Ghana then. He was very good in marketing and branding, and I said, hey, Meister, I need you to start managing me. And he was doing it, part time. And at some point, you just know when things become a lot more busier, and I knew I needed somebody full time. And so, luckily enough, I just looked around my friend circle, and I knew all of what I needed really was somebody who was very good at negotiations and like a very good people person, because a lot of times I'm a hothead, and so I needed somebody that could like calm down in those times and could negotiate. And those were the two key things that made me go pick that person to become a manager. So it was on demand, really. I think either Rashid or Mr. Pace was saying you can't manage something that's not there, right? So as soon as I knew there was demand, I just knew that was it.
The time. So we'll come back to the management aspect of things, but I wanted to, touch on a good deal, right? So, one of the things I said earlier was we hear so often, right? People saying that, I got signed, I got a deal negotiated. Maybe they had the wrong manager, maybe they had no lawyer, but they got into a deal and it was a bad deal. And so, this only comes to light years later. How do you define for an artist, how to identify a good deal or a bad deal? What does that look like when you're starting out and excited? What are some key things that you need to look for to make sure that you're not being taken advantage of?
I think the first thing is that, people need to understand just in life, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. And again, you would not, I think Lester said it yesterday, you wouldn't go to court without a lawyer. So why would you go to a negotiation without a representative, someone who knows the business? And I think a lot of times, and it's no fault to their own, a lot of the, especially in America, a lot of the artists get signed, they're in dire financial situations and they just want to get out, and it's just a way for them to get up. And probably in the back of their mind is, once I get bigger and better, I'll renegotiate. Being in the major label system as long as I have, I think, the organizations have morphed over years. And I said yesterday, I think we're more partners today than we have been in the past. Excuse me. I think that a lot of what artists need to understand is that, this is a business. And I think that today, labels are more like banks. They're investment banks. And a label can, not even a independent label, can make you anything more than what you are. They're there to articulate your vision, to amplify your vision and help you get where you want to go. So the more leverage you have when you're walking into the deal, the more opportunity you're going to have to get a fair deal. I think that a lot of times artists come in and whatever they did to get there, the grind, the grit, and all the things they did, and let's just say we'll use $1 million deal as a benchmark, they get $1 million deal and then they stop working, not realizing that $1 million is an investment against their future earnings. So you need to be doing everything you can to get that million plus so that you can have a more fair equity piece of it. So I think, one, they need to have representation, but also two, be real realistic about what they're bringing to the table. If you don't write, that means you're going to have to hire writers going to get a piece of your money. If you don't play instruments, that means there's going to be musicians producers who are going to get a piece of your money. If you don't have any concept of how to take on some of the responsibility, because this is your career, right? If you don't have if you don't have any expertise, if you don't have any wherewithal of how to navigate and negotiate your career past getting signed, a lot of what you're doing, you're paying for services. So you're hiring a promotion guy, you're hiring a publicity guy, you have to pay producers, you have to pay A&Rs. Your publishing split is going to look a little differently than if you write and produce your own music. And I think those are things that people need to take into consideration. I also think you need to look at the term of your deal. You know, if you do a deal that's going to be 5, 6, 7 years long, think about how long it's going to take you to reach a point of recoupment. So I think it's an education process. Back to what Godwin was saying, you have to be educated on what you're walking into. And again, you know, the deep dive technical information, obviously you need a lawyer for, but there's some basic things that you can learn just by looking on the internet and what seems reasonable. And also, too, don't be so in awe of the people you're sitting across the table from when you're negotiating. This is your life. This is your career. So I'd ask every question. I'd ask, you know, hypothesize every scenario. You know, when can we renegotiate? How long is this deal going to take me? You know, what services am I going to get? What's the process now that I have a hot song or a hot project or a developing project and you sign me? What's the next step? And I think a lot of people just go into it blindly. They get the royalty check or the advance check. They don't pay their taxes. They go out and buy cars and jewelry. You know, not all of them, but a lot of them do. We see it all the time. And then, you know, you look up 6 months later and like, what happened to that hot artist you guys signed? Or they don't want to work. Or they, you know, they took the money and ran. Or now that they are comfortable, the hunger's gone and the creative juices aren't flowing the way they need to flow. So I think it's a lot that stems in education, but a lot of it is about coming to the table and understanding what your leverage is when you get there.
That's a lot of good stuff. I think, you know, that you know, just kind of zeroing in on the fact that that money that you get is actually a loan, right? Like it's not money in the bank, nothing
Right.
to do, you know. And I think my takeaway from what you said is, how do you make sure that you come to the table with as much as possible, you
Yes.
know, and, you know, create leverage for yourself so that you can actually do a lot of the stuff. I think that take me back to Mr. Eazi, because he's like wearing 50 hats. But it's interesting because now with EmPawa Africa, you're taking on artists as well. So
Yeah.
when you try to do deals with them, right, what kind of deals do you engage in to make it fair and equitable? And what are you looking for under your umbrella?
Yeah. You know, I think the root shock that came to me when I flipped to the other side, you know, was the fact that sometimes what might be the right thing is not the profitable thing. And what might be the profitable thing might not be the right thing. And you know, and and this is in the sense where, you know, I sit down with a new artist I'm about to invest in, and you know, and sometimes you could see some traction, but you can't really, truth is like you can't really tell the future. You could be guided by some data, but you don't know what's going to happen down the line. And you see that, just like my friend said, you're really giving an advance on future earnings, and it's backed on nothing. It's really backed on nothing for a new artist. And so that's a very, very, like if you went to the bank, it's just imagine yourself walking to a bank now and say, hey, I need $1 million. And you know, there's no collateral, there's nothing. And you know, you got to realize you can't go arrest the artist and say, pay me back my money, because it's like it's gone. So the risk is high. And so,
Right.
but you know, that was the first shock to me. And then I'm like, okay, this is why this thing is like this. But what I've done is, with every deal and every negotiation with an artist, I try to be in touch with the lawyers. So I'm like, okay, what are the lawyers saying? What is this person saying? And rather than take the offensive, in the beginning, I remember like the first deal I wanted to sign, or the first artist that told me, hey, I don't want to be in this deal again. I was like, what? I gave you the best deal. You've blown up, and now you want to switch up on me? And I was mad. And so I had to that to go on instead of being on the offensive. I'm like, okay, what is the takeaway from this? What is the lesson? Okay, I think in my head that this is the best deal ever, but then the artist thinks different. Okay, is there any validity in the artist's opinion? And so when I find, okay, this is valid, okay, maybe I can edit my deal, and we keep iterating. No one deal is the same. There's nothing like a standard deal for every artist. You know, it's nothing like, hey, so sometimes I'm discussing with lawyers, and this is industry standard. I'm like, there's no such thing as industry standard. This is different deals for artists. And so I keep iterating. In the end, what's key for me, because we're not like not the traditional label, where we actually do label services. This is what we do, is okay, if I'm giving you the advance, what is it backed on? If there's nothing, if it's backed on nothing, if you don't have a catalog to show for it with past earnings, then it's going to be a higher rate. You're going to take a higher rate, and at the point where you recoup on the investment, I come back to you, which is something I'm doing, which is not usually done. I think is I come back to you and say, hey, you've recouped on your investment, so now your masters return back to you. It's like, yeah, your masters was the security, but now I'm flipping it back, and we still maintain an equity stake in the masters. So it's not like, I mean, we created it together, creative services, marketing, all of that investment, and so we still take an equity position in it. So I just round up by saying, like, we keep iterating, but for me, I'm always like, okay, I'm an artist. What would I sign? And even if I'll sign this, maybe the artist doesn't want to sign it, and then I go back to the accountants and say, does this make business sense? If it doesn't, yo, I love you, peace out. Maybe you just distribute with us. There's the normal distribution. We do label services where you distribute. We help you with marketing, creative, blah blah blah, and it's 20%, 80-20. Fine, no money, no cash, it's done. Like, you go have fun. We don't own your masters, nothing. You get your report, you get your dashboard. But if we're gonna invest, it's artist-friendly deals that have to make financial sense. And so, and for a lot of artists, it's like you need to make that decision, because when you, like he said, there's so much knowledge out on the internet. Like, you don't even need to, I didn't go to any school for music. Like, I learned by sitting in boardrooms with people and just being quiet and just learning and not being afraid to ask the stupid questions. Like, I remember the first time I heard recoupable, I'm like, what's the meaning of recoupable? What does that mean? And the truth is that people want to do business with you. They will tell you what it means. You just need to ask. And when you do think that's a good deal, my brother, just like he said, take your money and go to work, and just don't look back. If there's anything, you should be thinking, okay, in my contract, is there a clause where I can buy back my masters? If that's something to do, is there, and that you have to put in twice the work you put in to get to the point where you want. Just go get it, and come back like Jay-Z did. Jay-Z, he went and got it, and he came back, and he's where he is today. So that's what we do at EmPawa.
That's incredible.
Can I say something?
Go ahead, yes, sir.
I think since most of the artists we're talking about new and upcoming artists, and everything that everybody here said. So looking at that aspect, I look at it like when you grow up, you go play sports. You start off in the minor leagues, and then you might go into a farm team, and you start off, and you have to go to these certain levels. I think artists today want to come. I'll be here today, and I want to be in the majors tomorrow. It doesn't work like that. And then what you also realize that only certain people make it to the major league. So what artists should do now, especially in today's environment, 20 years ago, no problem. But you got all these digital service platforms now that you can go and get your music on that you couldn't do back in the day, because back in the day you had to pay for CDs, get your music on the shelf. It was so much harder now. So now you have a chance to be in elementary. Let me go put my music up on a digital service platform. You can be a 12-year-old, you know what I'm saying? And you just start practicing, working on your craft, because a lot of artists today, they put out a record today, 5 years ago, they listen and say, oh, that was horrible. So you get a chance to better your craft. You get a chance to make earnings on what you're doing, but take it at a different level. And like Eazi said, it's an 80-20 deal. Right now you get 80% of your money you sent to, and you learn all these things, and then you don't have to worry about the splits, because the splits are done on the sheets are done right there. So whoever did the music, whoever produced, you get all of those. So the money goes directly to them. Nobody's coming and say you cheat me. So a lot of things that they didn't have back in the day are already set, the standards there for the artists. So I think we got to get the people out of mentality of thinking I want to be on a major label. I want to do that. If you got to be major label material to come to Columbia to be on RocNation. And what we do right now, we don't develop artists. You have to develop yourself. So what you have to do is sit back and you start getting big numbers and streaming. Trust me, somebody's going to call you. If your numbers are not doing what they're looking for, you won't get a call. So I know we're talking about what the conversation is, but I think those are things that the artists should do before they get the representation, like Eazi said, and then they'll feel like they have something to offer. You don't have anything to offer. Easy's not going to give you more money or invest any money, not being able to recoup, as Azim said.
I think the other takeaway though is that people need to focus on the business piece, and I think a lot of again artists it's an emotional thing. A lot of them don't have the process, and that doesn't forgive them from having to learn. It does not mean that they shouldn't want to be a part of the process, but the business is such a huge piece of it, and the business is going to last a lot longer than the music actually lasts. Going back to buying your mattress back, that's generational wealth. If you have a catalog that's generating, 2, 3, 4 times, X what it was worth when it actually was current, that's great grandchildren that can benefit from that. So I think people need to really understand that the business piece of it is as much important as the music. The music is creative and it's absolutely what generates everything else. But the business piece is what's going to carry you forward, and you have to be very, very cognizant of that, and it's ever evolving, and I think again Eazi said it best. There's no boilerplate, industry standard. It moves and it shifts as the wind blows.
Wow. Godwin, I'm going to come to you, but there's a question for Mr. Eazi very quickly from Facebook. So someone wants to know the deal that you have with your manager. Do you just pay them every month, or is it a contract deal, maybe like a rev share kind of structure, or are they just an employee, or they're actually vested with your success?
Yeah, so I remember my first management deal. I think it was a 70-30 deal. My first manager, okay. I got 70%, he got 30%, and then when it was time for me to start, like I needed to reinvest. I found out that I was reinvesting all the money, and that didn't really sit right with me. I felt, if you were, I felt what you kill is what you eat. So I felt like, I need for someone to get 30%, they need to also have some equity position. And then when I switched management, it changed as well. The management fee dropped. And now with EmPawa, I'm under EmPawa management, and then EmPawa takes 20% of what I earn across board. So I think it definitely switches. Like some of the artists that we work with have the managers on payroll, and then they set targets for their managers. And when the managers hit those targets, they get bonuses. And that has its positive and negative. Like I think it was Azim or Lester that said, you might then have a manager that's just looking at the money, and it's like, hey, I'm just looking at how much am I going to get? Forget that radio station. I just want to get that $5,000 and just keep it moving. So you have to really know what works for you. But I've always learned when someone has skin in the game, they perform better. And then when you need to motivate people. So even if your manager is on payroll, on a salary, you need to be able to find ways to motivate them, just like you have staff and then you give your staff equity option, stock option in the company. That's the same way I think we have to think about managers. And if your manager is investing, then of course it's a different conversation. Like I think at EmPawa, some artists, we just give artists standard, like our standard. So there's no our standard management deals, which is 80-20. And then we say, aside our management services and label services, we're also going to offer you finance. And then the split goes up because, since we're putting in money. So I think that's how, emerging artists should think about it. Yeah, Godwin. I think Godwin might have some insight on that as well, because he's He's been managing everybody except me.
That's funny. I mean, to respond directly to that, I met Eazi in 2017 for the first time, and Eazi told me everything he wanted to do, and then went ahead to do everything. So I don't know what you want me to do, bro. The I wanted to talk on a few things from what was mentioned. The first thing is about how identifying roles as a manager is extremely important. So you have, when you're going in to have conversations with labels about your deals, what I always tell artists is, what are we bringing to the table? A lot of the time, as Azim said, you have people who you start your career and you're probably at the validation stage. Someone just told you you're dope, right? Someone just said, "Oh, you're really dope. You're really good. You don't have a following. You've not put out music. You don't have a catalog. Nothing. But you want to be Wizkid. You want to be Davido. You want to be Burna Boy immediately." And that's where I believe the problem starts. There are a lot of people who don't want to go through the process of development. They don't want to go through the process of how they don't want to prepare themselves. Because someone has asked me for a definition of artist development, and I'm like, it's preparing for success. But also, success is relative, because you have situations where not everybody. Welcome back, Gigi. Not everybody is going to be Wizkid. Not everybody is going to be Mr. Eazi. I know a lot of artists who come to me and I'm like, you know what? How about you get yourself in a position to just pay rent? Yeah? So that's phase one, right? Figure out, how do I make a living? You're coming from no money at all. How do I make 100K? Set targets and build from there. And from my experience, most artists don't want to hear that, to be honest. I've left several meetings where people have sat with some labels on this side, and the general reaction is, okay, we're bringing you here because we want you to tell us how you can get us on shows. And I'm like, you haven't even put out music. You can't be a product and not market and just want to get sold, right? So that's another issue. A bigger problem I find in terms of that is, I think it's also how people think. So I'm speaking specifically about this side, and in Nigeria, we don't have classification of radio stations, even if they tell us that they fall under certain classes. So you have a college radio acting like a commercial radio, acting like a national commercial radio. Even for the artist, you can't even find the channels to grow. So you can't say, okay, I'm going to start with college radio, community radio. I'm going to work my way up and hopefully get into that commercial radio space. But that's because everybody's charging you money as if you're applying to commercial radio. So that's another thing that makes it a bit difficult. So, but luckily we have things like social media, right, that presents that opportunity to build your audience. I have artists I've advised that have 2,000 followers and have figured out how to earn money from 800 of them, because they know those 800 people like their music, and you build from there. When you have that leverage, any negotiation is based on leverage, right? And if you don't have leverage, you're not going to get the deal you want. You're going to get the deal you deserve. And so that's the other thing. Also on managers and earning money, I think, look, I always say this: if you earn a salary, you are an employee, right? So it's important to be clear about your expectations as a manager from those people, from whoever is paying you money. The role of the manager, as Eazi said, you eat what you kill. Even that sounded a bit. But I think most people need to understand, even for artists, if you want somebody who truly represents your interest, then hire a manager outside your label, right? Get somebody who represents you outside the label, because if somebody is being paid by the label, they owe their loyalty and alliance to, or allegiance to, the label. It's who pays you that you answer. So I think it's important to understand that. So if you have somebody fighting on your behalf, also check the contract terms. there are certain artists who have signed off management in their contracts to the label, right? So when you come in, it becomes sort of a conflict of interest. And sometimes you have scenarios where I have a client who hired me. When I looked through the contract, I saw that any management contract he signs has to go under the label, the label's umbrella. So as a manager, you have to report to the label. So I actually signed as a business development. We gave it a different name, and that was how I worked with them. So it's being careful and understanding what you're doing to ensure that you find ways around fixing the system. Yeah. So I wanted to speak on those things. You said you had a question for me.
You answered the question, so there. But there was a point in which you said it's important to have management independent of the record label, and I saw Lester laugh and shake his head. I don't know if you wanted to, if you had thoughts on that comment, Lester.
No, basically, it was basically from what I said earlier about the representation of that we spoke about earlier. So I was just totally agreeing with what he said.
Okay, great. So I think this would be probably as we work towards the end of this panel discussion, is to go to each panel member, and we'll start with you, Lester, in terms of just key takeaways, for somebody at the beginning of the career, mid-career, and looking like they're going to hopefully get to the majors, right? In terms of representation and a good deal, from your perspective, just an analysis of what they should at least take away from this panel discussion in terms of your advice to them.
My advice to them would be, I guess, a couple of things I spoke on yesterday. First thing is like what I think when you went off, I was telling them that first thing, like Azim said, you should learn that you don't need a manager until you have something to manage. That's one of the key points I think they should be there. I think second thing is like what I was saying, that as a new artist, that they should look at this is the beginning of their career and start learning the business aspect, which we all said that they need to learn the business. The third thing, once they learn the business aspect side of this, is you come in and now you're ready to release music. Go find out the different channels. Go find out, like I was saying earlier, any of the DSP services, which one is it? Don't just get on a DSP service. Find out how their payouts are. Finding out all the things and how the splits are from that service, and then call around and check with other people and see who they deal with, other artists, and find out whether the good things and bad things. And it's like anybody. You find out something, you go check about this person. This guy good? Do they do good business? Their practices and everything. And then once that, I think that after that third part is done, I think the next thing on the DSP side, because that's real important to me, just working with my artists that I'm dealing with right now, is to start trying to build your side. And I think, like I said, we spoke on yesterday, it's a worldwide business, even from, like, we're trying to bridge this bridge between Africa and United States. We got to get in contact, just like I need to know who Mr. Godwin is. I need to know who Mr. Eazi is. You know what I'm saying? So as we start to build those bridges, that we start helping artists that could work on both sides of the table, but then the artists need to start marketing and promoting themselves, because like Mr. Godwin said, that you can go to the college radio stations anywhere now. So social media has opened that up. Take if you got a team of people, hey man, we're gonna take $300 or $400 this week. We're gonna put it in a pot, and we're gonna go buy social media ads on Instagram or Facebook and advertise and this record that we're trying to push in those markets, because you think about the party promoters now. I own a radio station, and I can't get the club owner to buy any radio advertisement. You know what I'm saying? So the club owners now, they're advertising on social media. So why don't you? So you say, oh, nobody's gonna look at that ad, but you never know. You keep putting somebody's ad. You think Coca-Cola, even though as big as they are, they still advertise. They still market their product. You have to market yourself. You have to build your brand. So I think that's the thing we got to do. I hope that they take away from here. Quit thinking about being in the majors when you're still in the minors.
Wow. Godwin.
Yes.
What's your takeaway?
Well, my takeaway for artists would be identify where you are in your career, and leverage accordingly. So I know that there are a lot of artists who are in their feedback stage and their moms are saying they're great, and then there are the ones who are in their validation stage, where some of us are hearing and thinking things. But understanding that those two stages don't mean anything to businesses. For them, it is your talent is great, and what they're looking for is value. So if I, as Eazi said, what's the collateral? If I put money down now, what's the guarantee that I'm going to get some money back? So identify where you are. When you're in that validation stage, or maybe you're establishing yourself, it's important that you're also being able to bring something to the table. Also, when you now become a superstar, and this is also a conversation that they should be listening in, it's important to learn to connect to your audience. Don't get caught up with the idea that you're doing great and you've succeeded, because tide will continue to move. So don't get lazy. Don't, just because you've gotten a deal, recognize that the moment the deal is signed and you get the money, that is when the actual work starts. And I think the most important thing is, and I know that I say this even as a manager, sometimes managers ask me why I say this, is get a lawyer. From everything you hear, get a lawyer before you get a manager, because even your manager needs to sign a contract, right? So ensure that you're protecting yourself from the beginning, and yeah, that's pretty much my advice.
Get a lawyer. Thank you, Godwin. Azim?
Well, first of all, I've enjoyed this thoroughly. I look forward to connecting offline with all the brothers and sisters we've been on here with. This has been amazing. So congratulations, NABFIM, for what you guys are doing. I think it's a necessary platform. And again, as Burna Boy said, Black people matter when Africa matters, and we have so much work to do. And I would like to encourage, our brothers and sisters on the continent, just from hearing what I've heard over the last 2 days, this feels like the music business for hip hop in the late 80s, early 90s. Like, you guys are where we were. So let's reach across the ocean and let's use the technology to advance that cause a lot faster, because there's so much, there's so much to do. Godwin pretty much, he took everything I would like to say. He pretty much said, I'm 100% in agreement with his comments. Lester, this is usually where I give my speech. This is the Kill the Dream speech for artists, and just having been one. And one of the things I say about Behind the Mic is I had a 7-year career as an artist, but I've had a 25-year career as an executive. And I would like to encourage everybody to really do a deep dive assessment and assess your talent. Like, being in front of the microphone, being on stage, performing, all that's great. I've done it. I love to hear the roar of the crowd. But we need good people behind the scenes. And, desire does not necessitate ability. The music business is probably the only art where people can just decide they want to do it. And to Godwin's point, the validation stage, if you get 10 people to believe and then 20 people to believe, you think you really have it. And to be perfectly honest, we're still a less than 10% success rate in our business. That's not a lot. Right. But I think that, we'd be a lot further along with people who truly are passionate about the business and the music, took a real honest assessment and put the microphones and the instruments down on a professional level and got behind the scenes. I think you said it earlier, you're teaching these classes and someone says they don't want to be a manager, they want to be a lawyer. That's what we need. We really need good, credible, righteous and upright people behind the scenes to propel this business forward, because a lot of people need that. And I think that it starts with a passion for the music. And just because you may not be able to be successful as an artist does not mean that you can't be a part of the process. So I would just encourage people to really say, am I really as good as I think I am? Or should I take my passion for the music and go help other people fulfill their dreams? So again, I thank you guys for having me, and I look forward to the work we are going to do together collectively.
Thank you, Azim. I totally agree. About 20-something years ago, I gave it a shot at the Apollo Theater. It did not go well for me. So, so I'm here. Didn't work out.
Look at you now.
Now, Mr. Eazi, for all the lawyers and bankers and doctors out there that think they got some talent, I mean, your story has been incredible. If you could just kind of just close out talking to both people, especially in this space where it's becoming more acceptable to become an artist, right? Like, people that want to branch out and try something different. What is your advice for them in going that route. And I think that somebody like you, with your background, I think you've brought so much to the industry, and that's kind of what we need. People that are multifaceted, that can be artists but still understand the business. What's your takeaway in terms of how people can use whatever skills that they have to make sure that they represent themselves a lot better, right? And they add value to the business, especially in Africa. As Azim said, we're still in 1980s. So I think we need some of that knowledge, to really come into the industry here.
I'd just say, like, I'm trained as an engineer. I'm a mechanical engineer, right? This is my first degree.
Okay.
And when I have my master's in engineering business management, and I'd see how maybe I thought I was just I didn't know why I was in school when I was doing it, because I never wanted to design any engine. But when I sit in meetings now, and when I'm putting out music, I see how I am almost obsessed with data. And that's the analytical thinking in me that's like, is so obsessed with data, and I'm finding out how to assemble things. Okay, how do the records work? And that's why, like, I'm open to, like, back in the day, like 5 years ago when I came on the scene, producers won't get anything aside the payment they pay them for the beats. Songwriters won't. I'm talking about the African space. Songwriters weren't getting anything. Producers were like house boys. It's like, hey, come and make this beat for me. Go pick up my shoes. Go wash plate. But now everything is changing, and it's the fact that I know when you're building an engine, it's collaboration. And so now for me, I'm not shy to say I got help on this record, because I know it's collaboration, right? No one person builds an engine from A to Z. So back to your point, for people who, they've gotten an education and they're getting music, I say, why not? Why not? And everything you've learned, you can actually apply it into the music. And just like I've forgotten who was saying, we actually need more people that care about the music to be on the other side, on the executive side, So I'd say, what, just go for it. And for the last thing I wanted to add for emerging artists is a little bit of what everyone has said. You have to know where you are, and you could start from, like, I remember starting from distributing my music on TuneCore, and then before TuneCore, on SoundCloud. And so SoundCloud was kind of my validation stage, and from SoundCloud to AudioMac, and from AudioMac to Hawkshare, and from Hawkshare to TuneCore, and from TuneCore to label services, to doing licensing deals with labels, to owning my own label, my distribution. So you have to respect the process and know that there's a price to pay. And just like he said, there's the minor league and there's the major league, and you might get there in the end, but you got to know where you are. And just when you've done research, you've signed that deal, go out there, work, and just try and get to the next phase. There's no point looking back. Just get it. Let's keep it moving.
Mr. Eazi, thank you so much. Johnny, I know you're going to come in. This, for me, has been such a learning. You guys have been incredible. I'm sure the viewers, people watching, have had a treat. If there are any questions, please, you can leave them, and we'll, either let Lester, Godwin, Azim, or who did I miss? Mr. Eazi, answer if you have any questions that we didn't get to answer. But this has been great. I think my takeaway, especially, looking at artists looking to get into the business, that it starts with an individual. It starts with you, right? So you have to kind of take responsibility for your career. You have to take responsibility for who you choose to be a part of your team. You have to make sure that you use the resources out there. As Azim said, there's a plethora of information out there. So don't wait for a good manager, or don't wait for, a good lawyer. You need all those things, but you need to take responsibility and inform yourself so that you can pick the right manager, and you can pick the right lawyer, and you can know where you are in your journey. So don't leave it off for anybody else, right? You have to be equally vested in your product and in your brand. For that, thank you very much. You guys have been incredible. Johnny, you can take the floor.
Well, the first thing I want to say, the questions were coming so fast. obviously, we're going to collect those and try to get back to you guys and get some answers. But if you don't mind, what I would ask, if you would go to the NABFIM Africa Facebook page, and so because some of the questions were directed specifically to our panelists. One question that was directed to you, Godwin, was that if there's an artist and you believe in the artist and you want to work with the artist, they don't have anything, not doing anything, but you believe in this artist, how would you approach that situation? Would you actually go into a negotiation or a contract with that artist and you know they're not making any money, but you believe in the talent, you believe in the artist, how would you approach that? And of course, like I said, you can go to our Facebook page and answer that. The questions were coming so fast, I couldn't type as fast as they were coming.